Good morning. Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. I'm trying to. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to get the YouTube going.
Here's some inspiration.
I'm duly inspired. Thank you. Just got to get this screen share going. Give me a moment. Okay, got it. How you, Dave?
Fine, thanks. You, Rabbi?
Baruch Hashem, Rita?
Fine, thanks. Rochel and family?
Baruch Hashem, trying to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. I'm going to be sending in, under the current circumstances, our 4 Yahrzeit messages to
Sandringham Gardens.
Sandringham Gardens, yes, to Rabbi Fox, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be doing that. I was going to send them to you, but things are different now.
Afraid I can't help at the moment.
Morning,
Yeah, I
Ron.
know.
Morning, David.
Good morning,
Morning.
Ken. How are you?
Morning, Kent.
Hi, David.
I'm wondering who will I have the same audience on Friday morning as I have on Monday afternoon?
Usually, yes.
Similar.
Yeah.
Very. Morning, John.
Morning, morning.
Why don't I see everybody?
Morning, Rabbi. Morning, Kent.
Good
Morning,
morning.
David.
There
Hello,
you are,
John.
there you are. Okay.
Hello.
Now I see you. All right. That's better. So Rabbi Darren is in New York, where it's now 3 a.m. So he asked me if I could stand in for him, seeing as it's 9 a.m. for me. And he offered to swap with me, and he'll do the Monday, where it's 7 a.m. in New York, which is a little bit more civilized. So let's get moving. We don't have a minion yet, but we'll start going. I don't have a minion in shul either, so.
Yeah,
Nice to see some Jews over here. Okay.
yeah.
Well, welcome all you Jews. Okay.
Thank you. Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, so we are on Rambam Nezirut, chapter 7, the laws of the Nazarite. It's the first part here is rather technical. You'll forgive me if I sort of go through it quickly. The teaser I sent out earlier will come towards the latter part of the chapter. That's the more interesting discussion, which I would prefer to focus on. So let's give it a shot. So just bear with me again. The first couple of halachas are rather technical and even a bit gory, because we're talking about the Nozer who is experiencing Tumat Met, which means he came into contact with the dead. Now, you've already learned, I presume, that a Nozer takes a vow not to come in contact with the dead or wine, etc. But sometimes it happens against his will, you know. What if he's a doctor and a guy dies in his arms or something? So we have to take these things into account, and the halacha is different depending on various circumstances. We also have here very rather gory nitty-gritty about what parts and how much volume of a corpse or pieces of a corpse, you know, in war and things, it's bodies get blown to bits. And if people, you know, there's different quantities and different qualities of contact with the dead or parts of a dead body. So we have to deal with that. But I really, not my favorite subject. You'll forgive me. So we're going to go through that first part a little bit more quickly. יש תומות מן המת שאין הנוזיר מגלח עליהם ולא סותר את הקודמים ואף על פי שנטמע בהם טומאת שיבה. There are types of impurity resulting from contact with the corpse that do not require the nozir to perform a shaving and do not invalidate the days previously observed. Normally, when he comes in contact with the dead, he stops in his tracks all that he's done. You've learned that, right? And he's got to go back to go and start all over again. But sometimes, if it's not entirely exactly what we define halachically as a corpse, then it will not be required. The rationale is that it is not stated concerning such situations, when one will become pure due to contact with a corpse. It doesn't say that. What it says is when a person will die upon him. So it looks like somebody died on him in his hands type of thing. He wasn't expecting it. It was sort of accidental. So the language of the verse implies that he must become impure with those impurities that involve the actual substance of the corpse. Afterwards, he must bring the sacrifices required and perform the shaving required when emerging from impurity. And all of the days he observed ritually are invalidated. But there are times when this will not have to happen, and he will not have to go through the shaving and the sacrifices and start counting again. He can actually keep counting depending on the technical circumstances. So these are the types of impurities in contact with the corpse that an Nazarite must shave because of contact with them, meaning these are serious contact with the corpse, and it'll invalidate everything he's done till now, and he has to start all over again. And soon he'll come to those which will not be required. So first we give a whole list of those which are considered proper parts of a corpse, which would invalidate, and he'll have to go back to go. A stillborn fetus, even if the sinews connecting its lips have not formed. B, an olive-sized portion of the flesh of a corpse. C, an olive-sized portion of a decomposed corpse. D, bones from a corpse which represent the majority of the number of the bones of a corpse, even though the volume is not a fourth of a kav. A kav is a very small measure, so it's not a lot. E, bones which represent the majority of the structure of the bones of a corpse, even though the volume is not a fourth of a kav. So the first was the number of bones, and the next is the majority, the structure of the bones. D and E, slightly different. F, a half of a kav of bones, even though they do not represent the majority of the number of the structure of the bones of the corpse. As I said, a kav is small. All the bones must, however, be from one corpse, not from two. The G, the backbone that comes from one corpse. H, the skull that comes from one corpse. Why am I thinking of Hamlet for some reason? I, a complete limb that comes from one corpse. J, a limb taken from a living person that has flesh that could cause it to regenerate in a living person. Were it part of a body, that flesh would regenerate. K, half a log of blood. How much is a log? Half a log of blood from one corpse. A log is more a log is a liquid, so we're measuring blood. How much is a log? Anybody see the scroll down to the footnotes to see how much is a log in our language? Let's see if we can get there quickly. Half a log is 172 cc, 300. According to okay, so there's different opinions. Call it 300 mil. Where are we? Sorry about that. Okay. Finally, so L, a handful of the decomposed mass of a corpse. So if it's decomposed, then it's a handful. Now there are two terms here, netzel and rekev, which are Hebrew and halachic terms dealing with a corpse. What does netzel mean? It means flesh from a corpse that decomposed and became putrid liquid. I hope you've had your breakfast already. 3.
No, not yet.
I don't want to ruin your appetite. The decomposed. Sorry. Okay, that's netzel. Rekev is the decomposed mass of a corpse. Does not convey ritual impurity unless it was buried naked in a marble coffin and was entirely intact. If one limb was lacking, or it was buried in garments or in a wooden or metal coffin, there's no concept of rekev. The concept of rekev applies with regard to a corpse alone, which excludes a person who was slain, for his blood is lacking. We said before that if it has to be from one corpse, when two corpses are buried together, the hair and the nails of a corpse were cut off and buried together with it, or a woman was buried together with a fetus in her womb, the rekev does not convey ritual impurity. Similarly, if one ground up a corpse until it became a decomposed mass, these laws do not apply. It must decompose naturally, not manually. If one ground the corpse and then left its remains until they decompose naturally, or a portion of the body decomposed while the person was alive, he died, and then the entire body decomposed, there's an unresolved doubt concerning this halacha. What is the halacha? The rabbis were not 100% sure. Hence, if a Nazirite becomes impure because of this kind of rekev, this decomposed mass, which became putrefied liquid, there is an unresolved doubt whether he is impure. Similarly, there is an unresolved doubt whether a Nazirite is impure if he contacts impurity from a fourth of a kav of bones coming from the backbone or the skull when he is under the same shelter as they are. Tumat ohel, we learned that before. So presumably, if you ask a shaila in such a case, the rabbi will say, look, it's not sure, rather play it safe, 5. What's fascinating, I'm just going to mention that the Rambam does not shy away from any detail, any aspect of Torah. So this is really not the most exciting subject, but it's Torah, and you have to learn it, and you have to know what to do. And if someone has the situation, and we're living in a so-called peaceful, civilized Western society, although sometimes one wonders about that. And generally, we're not exposed to such stuff. Nebuch in Israel, God forbid, when there's a pigua, when there's a terrorist attack, it never happened again. Think of the Sparrow bombing some years ago, the pizzeria there, and people were blown to bits. There were, and Zaka, that Israeli organization of holy, dedicated people, go around picking up pieces of limbs to give people the most kosher and proper, respectful burial as possible, even if their body has been blown to bits. It's the most horrible job in the world. And these people volunteered to do it. They're like saints, angels. I don't know how they do it. So these people might be asking such questions. Okay, today we don't have tumah like we had in the old days when the temple stood. But if this situation wasn't temple times, these questions would come up even today in 2021. So it's, for us sitting in South Africa, it's thank God it's not really a realistic, practical issue. May it never be. But unfortunately, these things have happened in history, and unfortunately still happen when acts of terror occur. 5, with regard to all of these 12 sources of impurity that were listed, if a Nazarite touches one of these sources, carries it, covers it from above with a portion of his body, the source of impurity covers a portion of the Nazarite's body, or the Nazarite and the source are located under the same shelter, under the same roof, he becomes Tomei. He must perform the shaving, the sacrifices, and his previous days he counted are invalidated. He's got to go back to square one. The only exception is a rekev, which we said the decomposed mass which became putrid liquid. It does not convey impurity when one touches it, for it's impossible to touch it entirely at the same time, for it's not a single mass. It's putrefied liquid, putrid liquid. If, however, one carried it or became impure because one was under the same shelter, then he must perform the shaving. 6, similarly, if a Nazarite touches or carries a bone from a corpse, even as merely the size of a barley corn, he must perform a shaving because of it and bring the sacrifice of the because of impurity, and his days are invalidated. A bone the size of a barley corn does not, however, convey impurity if one was under the same shelter. So ohel is more lenient than contact. If by contrast a Nazarite becomes impure because of contact with one of the following 12 manners, the days are not invalidated. So this is what we're coming to now. So until now, we said that if he has any contact with all the above, the whole list from A to L, he will become Tomei. He'll have to shave and bring the sacrifices and go back to square one with his counting. In the following list, from A to G, he will not have to do that. Even though he has come into some kind of contact with some kind of death, it's not considered significant enough to invalidate everything, and he may carry on his counting. A clod of earth from the diaspora, which normally we say, because the diaspora is mainly non-Jewish, Jews are a small minority in the diaspora, as opposed to Israel, where we are a majority. We had it not long ago. I think it was in my daily Rambam WhatsApp class, or share. The question of can a Kohen visit a hospital? Did you discuss that? A Kohen is not allowed to be under the same roof as a dead Jew. He may be under the same roof as dead non-Jews. But so may a Kohen visit a hospital? In Johannesburg, I can think of half a dozen rabbis who are Kohanim. Do they not do hospital visiting? It's one of the things I've done for years as a regular part of my job, visiting the sick. But if often people die in hospital, unfortunately. So how can a Kohen be under the same roof? So how can a Kohen go to a hospital? So the answer is that we go on the law of averages. In Israel, it's a problem because most patients in an Israeli hospital will be Jewish. In the diaspora, it's not a problem because most patients in the hospital are not Jewish. Even in Linksfield Clinic, the heart of Jewish Johannesburg, most patients are not Jewish. I could tell you, I go through the list. When I go visiting, I ask for a list of Jewish patients. It's a small list, 1 page, maximum 2 pages. The whole list is 10 pages. So a law of averages, we don't have to assume that there's going to be a Jew who died, punkt, at that time when you're visiting. So you're allowed to go. If, however, you become aware that there is a Jew who has died in a hospital, then you have to get the heck out of there ASAP. You may not delay even 1 second if you're a Kohen, if you know for a fact. But just to visit when you don't know for a fact, it's not a problem. So similarly here, it's interesting. Let's just look at note 28 for a second. Here, number 28, footnote. The Rambam writes, in the diaspora, people are not as careful with regard to burial or bury a corpse anywhere. Accordingly, our sages fear that perhaps a small portion of a bone will become mixed together with earth. Hence, they decreed, it's a rabbinic decree, that all earth from the diaspora, even if brought to Eretz Yisrael, conveys ritual impurity. So, based on chapter 2, we are forced to say that we are speaking about an incident where a Nazarite from Eretz Yisrael came in contact with the earth of the diaspora. Okay, let's go back. Sorry, where were we? Here we are. Okay, by contrast, so it becomes, okay, he becomes impure because of contact one of the following 12 matters, but nonetheless, the days he observed so far are not invalidated. He can carry on his count. A clod of earth from the diaspora, as we just mentioned, earth from a field in which a grave had been plowed. Both of these convey impurity through touch or if they were carried. Branches which emerge from trees, protrusions that emerge from fences, from a bed, a camel, or the like, cover him and one of the 12 sources of impurity. Remember, I think we spoke about it, that why they trimmed the trees at West Park Cemetery in Johannesburg, because when the Kohanim walk down the road, if a tree covers a grave on one side and the person in the road on the other side, if it's a big tree, the shade of the tree covering the grave and the person, he's halachically under the same roof. And therefore they trim those trees very, very neatly, that they shouldn't protrude much into the roadway, which would make the Kohanim Tomei. So that's what this C is about. D, going to be being under the same shelter as a quarter of a kav of bones that do not constitute the majority. Okay, it's too small. E, he became reviat of blood. A reviat is approximately 100 mils. It's the amount of wine you need to make kiddush, or to have the 4 cups of wine at the seder.
86.
Actually, 90 mils. 86 mils is the minimum. Some people say 100 and something, depending. But for Pesach, I say take 4 small cups of wine rather than big cups of grape juice. So 86 mils is the minimum definition of a reviat. If you touched it, carry it, or were under the same roof, he became impure because he was touched or was under the same shelter as a gravestone or a stone at the side of a grave, for they convey impurity in either of these 2 ways. We're not talking about a gravestone at the Mason, we're talking about a gravestone from a cemetery. He became impure because of contact with a limb cut from a living person or a corpse which does not have sufficient flesh upon it. I just want to say I have been having internet problems last few days. If I freeze, I still love you. Don't go away. I'll get back on. And if it happens repeatedly, I'll have to move it to my phone. The technician is supposed to be coming today, so I'm just apologizing in advance. Even though in all of the above seven, even though in all of the above Nazarite is impure for 7 days, and he must have the ashes of the red heifer. Isn't that interesting? We're reading this week's parashas about the red heifer. Sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and 7th day, he should not perform the shaving required when emerging from impurity, nor bring the sacrifices, nor are his initial days invalidated. Nevertheless, the days when he's impure are not counted as part of his Nazarite vow. So if he's impure for 7 days, he cannot count those 7 days as part of his 30 or whatever number of days he took upon himself to be a Nazir. 8, I got to move a bit more quickly. It's taking a long time and there's still a lot to get through. When a Nazirite touches a shelter in which a corpse is found or utensils that are touching a corpse, he should not have the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and 7th days. It appears to me, says the Rambam, that this law is unique to a Nazirite. Any other person who contracts impurity that persists for 7 days from utensils must have the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled upon him, as we'll explain in other halachas about tumah. Similarly, it appears to me, this is the Rambam writing, that the reason a Nazirite does not have the ashes of the red heifer sprinkled upon him on the 3rd and 7th day if he touches utensils that convey such is so that the days on which he is impure because of contact with the utensil be counted as part of the days of his Nazirite vow, as we said. 9, when a Nazirite contracts tzoras, oh man, can you imagine? This is adding insult to injury. And has his status as a Mitzorah defined, all of the days during which he is set apart Mitzorah and 7 days that he counts do not count as days of his Nazirite vow. The days when he's quarantined by conscience, remember that the Mitzorah has to go out of the camp, right? He's in quarantine. Long before COVID, the Bible talk about quarantine. The days when he's quarantined by conscience are counted as part of the days of his Nazirite vow. Similarly, if either a male or female has a zad emission from their flesh, we have learned that before, all of the days of the emission are counted as part of the Nazirite vow, although they are impure during those days. This was a halacha, Kabbalos, halacha l'Moshe Messinai, we transmitted orally by tradition all the way back from Moses. 10, needless to say, if a Nazirite becomes impure as a result of other sources of impurity, the days during which it's impure are counted as part of the Nazirite vow, and no days are invalidated, meaning not contact with the corpse, but other kinds of impurity. Say the different 8 types of vermin, etc. If he becomes impure with a corpse during the time he's afflicted with sarat, all of the days are invalidated. 11, a Nazirite permitted to become pure due to contact with the so is a mitzvah. If it's a mitzvah, what's a mitzvah? When is it a mitzvah to become impure? You should know that. See the following halacha. Here we go. Okay. He's going to tell us. He is forbidden to partake of all wine, whether in connection with a mitzvah or by the matter of the. What does that mean? A person took an oath that he will drink wine today, but he's a Nazirite. He took an oath not to drink wine. Well, now he has a mitzvah to drink wine. So it's a mitzvah for him to drink. Then he took a Nazirite vow. The Nazirite vow takes effect and supersedes the oath he took. So let's say, I'm going to drink wine every Shabbos. Then he takes a Nazirite vow for 30 days. There's going to be a few Shabboses in those 30 days. So the Nazirite vow supersedes the oath to drink wine. So he's now forbidden to drink wine. Needless to say, Nazirite is forbidden to partake of the wine over which Kiddush and Havdalah recited. Those are rabbinic, and a Nazirite vow is biblical. What is meant by the statement that he's permitted to become impure due to contact with the corpse when it's a mitzvah? You should know that. What we call met mitzvah is walking down the road and finds a corpse and there's no one else to bury it. We learned with a Kohen Gadol, even the Kohen Gadol has to bury the corpse in such a case. Kohen Gadol is the strictest, and he may not become Tomei. But if there's no one else to bury this poor dead Jew, then he has to do it himself. Likewise, the Nazirite has to do it. So he'll become Tomei. And what did he say? He said he's permitted to become impure when it's a mitzvah. But he may not partake of wine. Okay. So, whereas Kiddush is a mitzvah, he may not do that. Burying a dead person who has no one else to look after him is a mitzvah which he must do. 13. Okay, here's what I was referring to in the teaser. Kohen and a Nazir walk into a bar. Well, not a bar. A Nazir and a Kohen are walking down the road. And they find a corpse. This is straight out of the Mishnah in Nazir. I've spoken about this in Shul on a number of occasions. It's an interesting idea. So now, the question is, both the Kohen and the Nazir are not allowed to become Tomei knowingly. Right? A Kohen may not be a pallbearer. A Nazir may not be a pallbearer. So now the question is, who should bury this dead body? One of them can do it himself. Why should they both become Tomei? Only one should become Tomei. Why should we mess up two people's situation? So who takes precedence? Who is a higher degree of sanctity who should not bury that met mitzvah, that corpse? And who should be lesser and he should bury the corpse? Is it the Kohen or the Nazir? What do you think? Okay.
The Kohen.
Kohen.
We won't keep you in suspense.
The
When a
Kohen.
Nazirite and a priest encounter a corpse, which is a mitzvah to bury, meaning there's no one else to do it, the Nazirite should bury it, not the Kohen. And he should knowingly become impure, even though he will invalidate all the days he observed. He might be on day 29 of 30. He has to bury the corpse and go back to square one, not the Kohen. The Kohen should not become impure if there is someone else to do it, even if someone else is a Nazir. And here's why. The rationale is that the Nazir's holiness is timely. It's related to time, 30 days, 60 days, 120, whatever he took. Even if he took an everlasting day, even if he said he's a Nazir for life, it's still, he wasn't a Nazir before he took that vow. So it's not a lifetime thing. While a Kohen's holiness is beyond time. It's forever. You're born a Kohen. So from the moment you're born, you may not be Tomei. A Nazir took a vow at some stage in his life after his bar mitzvah. So therefore, the sanctity of a Kohen is on a higher level than the sanctity of a Nazir. A Nazir is a temporary sanctity. A Kohen is a permanent sanctity. And therefore, between the Kohen and the Nazir, who should bury the dead person? The Nazir rather than the Kohen. Now, if two Nazirites, one whose Nazir was for 30 days and one was 100 days, they're walking down the road and they encounter such a corpse, who should do it? The one whose Nazirite was for 30 days. If one was a Nazirite for a limited amount of time and the other was a Nazirite forever, sorry, 1 second. What is it, Jenny?
Someone's here to fix the computer.
Okay, he can come in, just tell him I'll be 5 minutes. I'm just finishing a class. My computer technician is here to fix the computer. So we have to finish. Okay, we're almost finished. Okay, so one is 30 or 100 days, the 30 days guys does it. If one was for a limited amount of time, the other was forever, one for a limited time should become pure. So the Nazirite of all time has a higher degree of holiness. 15th, what is meant by the statement that is permitted to shave when doing so is a mitzvah? When is it a mitzvah to shave? If he becomes a mitzorah. He's got tzoras, and in part of his healing, he has to shave. So then it's a mitzvah to shave. So he's doing a positive commandment. He shall shave all his hair, says by the mitzorah, as part of his purification. Now, whenever there's a conflict between a mitzvah taseh and a mitzvah lo taseh, a positive commandment versus a negative commandment, you can only do one. Which one should you do? If it's possible to observe both of them, that's obviously first prize. If not, the positive commandment supersedes the negative commandment. Let's just look at 69. And hence the Nazirite should shave his hair, because that is a Nazirite who becomes a mitzorah as well. So shaving is a positive commandment. Nevertheless, when he shaves his hair, he is violating a negative commandment and a positive commandment. His hair is holy. He shall let the mane of his head hair of his head grow, and he's violating a positive commandment. Does not, and observance of a positive does not supersede a negative commandment that is reinforced by a positive commandment. Why then does the positive commandment shame supersede the Nazirite vow? Because the Nazirite has already become impure because of the tzoras, and the days when he's defined as impure are not counted, as we explained. Hence, his hair is not holy during those days. Thus, the positive commandment is withdrawn, and only the negative commandment that a razor shall not pass over his head remains incumbent. Therefore, the positive commandment of shaving, because it's tzoras, supersedes it. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to stop it now. I'm afraid I can't engage in discussion now. I have to get this computer fixed so I can continue doing shiurim. Sorry for the technical stuff
Thank you, Rabbi.
in the beginning.
Thanks,
but
Rabbi.
I hope the
Thank you
end
very
was
much.
the
Very
end was
interesting.
quite interesting. Have a Shabbat Shalom. God bless you. And for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be doing Fridays and Darren will be doing Mondays. Sei gesund. I'm ending the meeting now. Be
Wonderful.
well.
Shalom,
Thank you.
everyone. Thanks, Rabbi.
God bless.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.